Greetings and a warm welcome to all of you to AI for HR Virtual Summit 2023. My name is Aima Atigari and I'm Community Manager at Remote Base. It's my absolute pleasure to be moderating today's session. The topic we are going to be discussing today is on transforming talent acquisition with AI-driven innovations, elevating candidates' experience to new heights. In an era where generative AI is penetrating every aspect of our lives, human resources is no exception. It is therefore critical for HR leaders to understand, embrace, and strategically navigate the future of talent acquisition. Throughout this summit, we will delve into the dynamic role of AI in talent acquisition, its impact on candidate experience, and how it's setting new standards in HR management. We'll touch on how AI can streamline the hiring process, bringing efficiency in managing talent and truly transforming talent experience. Joining us are a panel of distinguished speakers whose companies are leveraging AI in this space. They will share with us their rich experiences, insights, and lessons learned from integrating AI into their HR process. Without any further delay, let's dive into the world of AI in HR and uncover the potential of this powerful technology. I'd start by asking our distinguished speakers to introduce themselves, starting from you, Anita.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Anita Chandrasekhar. I am the global lead for talent strategy and operations at Zapier. I've been here for a little over a year, and I live in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Thank you. Over to you, Max.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Emma. I'm Max. I'm the CEO and founder of Dover. Dover is a recruiting orchestration platform used by thousands of the top tech companies in the US and internationally, and been working on it for about 4 years now. And I'm out here based in New York right now.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for your introductions. So before we delve into the main conversation of how AI is impacting talent acquisition while also improving the candidate's experience, I'd like each of you to share what's your definition of an ideal candidate's experience should be. Max, do you want to go first?
Sure. That's a great question. I love this question because I think we work with a lot of companies who say that they want a great candidate experience, but then when you drill one level further, a lot of companies don't actually know what that means or how to measure it. If you don't know what it means or how to measure it, obviously you can't be that good at it. So we've spent a lot of time and thought thinking about what is a good candidate experience. Obviously, you can measure it directly from candidates. So a lot of companies do surveys after interviews for both candidates that got offers, got rejections, and just ask them, "How was your experience?" Go straight to the source and get it that way. But barring that, I think a big part of candidate experience, probably more than 50%, in my opinion, is just the speed and responsiveness of the process. So just the candidate always knowing where they're at, getting recruiters or the hiring team getting back to them within a reasonable amount of time, usually within 24 hours, not getting ghosted, always having clear next steps, and just like speed and transparency through the process. I found that usually correlates to what candidates themselves perceive as a really good experience and makes them say, "Oh yeah, this company really has it really has the recruiting process together." So I would say that's probably the dominant variable. There's obviously lots of stuff that goes into it. How good your interviewers are, how kind you are to the candidate, how good your feedback is for them, all sorts of stuff. But I would say speed, if I had to identify one thing, speed and transparency would be the one thing.
Yeah. Spot on, Max. Like, when you were talking, I heard you say speed, and I think I want to believe everybody here has at some point been a candidate, right? And me being a candidate, definitely one thing I am always, eager to know is, what is happening in the process I currently am in, like the feedback. So yes, I completely agree with what you say regarding speed. Over to you, Anita. Would you like to chime in?
Yeah, great question. Double tap on a lot of what Max already said. But yeah, some of the things I try to think about are what I would appreciate if I were a candidate and put myself in the candidate's shoes. I think clear and transparent communication is definitely one, to know exactly what is happening at every point in time, but also not dragging the process on. Like a timely, efficient process is always helpful. Um, I think also providing candidates with the right kind of preparation and guidance so that they can, in fact, bring their best selves to the interviews, I think is one that's good. I've seen some places do this better than others with like providing a good framework with which they can come in. And as Max stated, I think engaging relevant interviews where interviewers really know what they're talking about, they're able to honestly share their views about the organization, their own lived experience in there, while stating the good and the bad, so people know exactly what they're coming into. Being respectful, and then lastly, I'd say just leaving feeling like all identities can truly flourish in a place like this. So just an equitable experience through overall. I think those are the big pieces that I would say. And then the one thing that I always appreciate is feedback at the end, especially if you're not moving forward in an interview process. I always appreciate it when a company invests the time to tell you how you could do something differently or how you could do it better next time. Yeah.
Definitely, well said. Feedback, yes. Empathy, definitely. Sometimes I ask myself if roles were reversed, and if I was in that person's position, how would I feel? So feedback and empathy is definitely, pointers that we should also be mindful of. Yeah. So moving on to the next question. So talent acquisition has seen a significant transformation with the advent of AI, right? Could you discuss some of the most impactful AI-driven innovations that have elevated the candidate's experience? Anita, do you want to go
Yeah,
first?
sure. I mean, AI driven innovations, I think, have definitely significantly enhanced the entire talent acquisition process. And specifically, I would say the candidate experience has been. Mainly, I think one of the big things has been the more personalized interactions, as well as streamlining the processes. And eventually, I think this overall lets talent acquisition as a whole become a more efficient and engaging process for both recruiters and candidates, which is great. So, at Zapier, I'd say we've been very thoughtful about how we are using AI so far, especially as it relates to personal identifying information. And so we're still working through, because it's all very new, we're still working with our legal and IT teams to ensure we're doing all of this right. So we're taking it a bit slow. But some of the new things that my team and I have tested a bit and played around with are one, I would say we've tried to build AI bots using the job descriptions that we've had, as well as the interview rubrics, to create really strong questions for the interviews. And especially for newer hiring managers, I've seen this to be really helpful, because this is one of the first times they're starting to interview, and providing them with that guidance, I find it to be incredibly helpful. Second, I think the big piece is the personalized communication and engagement, just providing that tailored content, either pulling it from LinkedIn or from a resume or whatnot, and helping that. I think it just nurtures relationships, and that in a sense overall enhances the candidate experience. um, Also, I would say there's a big use case here for eliminating bias, especially when it's used in things like note taking and summarizing interview notes. AI will just take and summarize notes and doesn't really know who the person is or how any interviewer may feel about the candidate. And I think that's a huge opportunity, albeit the risks that it comes with. And finally, I would say AI can really efficiently scan and analyze applications, and if needed, resumes, and just take all of the right information out of it by identifying the skills that match what is needed in the job description. And I think that just saves a ton of time for recruiters, and just automates the entire initial process. And Zapier, as an automation company, like really lives into some of that. Yeah.
Absolutely awesome. So time saving, personalizations, those are two key points that I take from your answers. Right. Over to you, Max. I mean, you run like a HR tech company. So can you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dover was actually one of the first users of GPT-3 back in 2020, first production users. So we've been sort of leveraging specifically like the large language models, the LLMs, for over 3 years now. And yeah, I totally agree with what Anita said. I think it touches all parts of the process. Kind of like we said, a lot of the candidate experience just depends on how well run the recruiting department or the recruiting team or whatever it might be on the company side is, and that has a huge impact alone on candidate experience. And so I would say the number one way that it affects it is just as much as you can streamline internal operations to help you create a faster, more transparent, clearer process for candidates, and just not be waiting a week to get back to people with unclear feedback about why they're not moving forward. Like I think that's really the lowest hanging fruit for most companies, is to just start being more organized internally by being more efficient and not having like a pile of resumes or a pile of candidates that you haven't gotten back to. So totally agree with that. And then I love the point about removing bias as well. I think a lot of what we hear about in the media is how AI introduces bias, but I think it's kind of interesting. It's like, I'll draw a quick analogy, right? Self-driving cars, everybody's always worried about accidents and self-driving cars getting into accidents, but it doesn't need to be like 100% perfect. Like humans are very bad at driving as well. Humans get into tons of accidents every year. And so, autonomous cars are already, 10x or even 50x less accident prone than humans. So I think it's normal for like the media to say, oh, this is so much bias and so mysterious of how this works, but humans are really, really biased a lot of the time, unless you're like, an incredible recruiting team that's like super, super stringent. And I don't even know how you would do that. I've worked with, hundreds of teams, and it's really, really tricky to do that. Whereas said AI is a lot more, if deployed correctly, it's actually a lot more objective, because it'll treat a lot of the, a resume is a resume, an interview is an interview. And there's a lot less of these preconceived notions that you might bring into that. So I do think just deploying a lot of these tools for helping you review applicants and sort of stack rank applicants, instead of just saying, oh, I've heard of this company that is on the top of this resume as opposed to this other company that I haven't heard of, right? Like that's honestly a filter that a lot of people use is, does this startup sound cool? And I've heard of it, right? Which is like a really bad filter if you're a hiring manager, because you probably know a couple dozen companies, and you're accidentally screening out tons of people that are actually really good. And so LLMs will actually help you prevent you from doing that.
Oh, thank you so much, Max. Moving on to the next question. Integrating AI in talent acquisition often means redefining an existing process. What are some challenges organizations might face in this transition, and how can they overcome them? Max?
Sure. I definitely think there's a lot of inertia. I've seen a lot of early adopters of this, which is really exciting. I think this technology is so clearly, clearly improves so many things that I think a lot of companies have jumped on it, especially because, ChatGPT made it like a very visible consumer app as well, which is really cool. I do think that the biggest thing that I've seen is just inertia, which is true for all companies and all new technologies. I think, company leaders tend to like to grow teams. They don't like to say, oh, cool, I can not hire more people and actually do this job with AI, because it usually means they have less influence within the organization, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, whatever your perspective on it is, larger teams usually mean more influence within a company. And recruiting teams are already often underappreciated, under budget, and things like that. So it's very hard for, a head of talent or a head of people to say, hey, I'm just going to actually, this thing we can do by automating it, right? And there's this other aspect of recruiting where it's a lot of, again, for better or for worse, it's at a lot of startups that we see, it's not very metrics driven. There's often a lot of sort of conflicting metrics that you might be measuring, or lots of different sort of experiences and emotions come into play of like, what is a good recruiting experience? There's this prestige element of like, oh, we do everything ourselves, in-house in kind of an artisanal way, right? We don't use any technology to automate it, but in the long run, I think those companies get outcompeted by companies that adopt technology. But in the short term, I think it's really hard for people to say, oh yeah, it's just, we're at this really big company, and instead of hiring a few, sourcers and coordinators and recruiters, I actually used AI to hire one person or two people. And so I think it's a lot of managerial inertia, which is, again, I think it's not like on the head of talent or the recruiting team that's the problem. I think that's just how organizations are set up to reward larger teams. So I think we do want to move to a world where teams are judged more on their output, as AI helps teams multiply their output, or even individuals multiply their output to be that of 5 people or 10 people or even more. So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Thank you very much, Max. Anita, I would like you to also chime in to the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, resistance to change is something that's always a challenge, I think, when redefining processes. And with AI, I think sometimes that resistance can be even more acute, just because, one, a lot of folks aren't sure what these changes will mean, as Max pointed out, for the future of their own jobs. So accepting it and taking it in is not the easiest. And the world of AI, I think, can also feel really inaccessible to some people who don't feel like they are overly technical in the way that they work. But I think the best way to overcome this is just through learning and being honest that this is something that is new to all of us and it's not going away, right? It's just something that we have to learn to accept. And so providing opportunities for the folks to learn how they can use AI in their work and finding ways to show them how it can supplement as opposed to replace the work, I think is really helpful. And expecting our recruiters to lean into it, even if it's feeling overwhelming at first, is one way. So for us on our team, this has meant having very specific AI goals for each quarter that we can test out and say, this is how we're going to use AI this quarter to make it work, and learn and then share with one another what has worked and what has not worked. And then having team-wide learning sessions. So I think one of the biggest challenges that at least from the operations side that we are facing is more around the confidentiality of the data and information as it relates to those of like candidates and employees with personal identifying information. So ensuring exactly how to use it, when to use the data, and what platforms to use the data on is something that we're still figuring out. But leaning into the change, I think, is just the best way to do it, because I don't think AI is going anywhere.
Yeah, well said. I think, as with any other thing, stepping in with one foot first definitely is the way to go, right? And also the assurance that, AI is not going to replace, but rather you can use it like to improve the processes and supplement would actually help drive adoption. Yeah. Over to the next question. So AI tools, this question is a bit like technical and practical. So AI tools in HR can potentially enhance communication with candidates. How can organizations leverage AI to improve engagement and responsiveness during the recruitment process? Anita, take this first.
Yeah. I mean, we started off the call with this. The secret to engagement and responsiveness during the recruitment process, I think, is just a highly personalized experience. I think that's a big piece of it. But however, highly personalized experiences just take a lot of time, and can sometimes fall short when recruiters just have so much on their plates. I think AI is a great way for us to allow some of these crafted custom outreach messages and follow up messages with half the effort from folks. So some of the examples are, so when sourcing, for example, you can customize messages based on what's on a person's LinkedIn profile or their public social media presence, if you'd like, and creating a custom follow-up cadence based on if people are engaging with the outreach, or finding other ways to contact them. I think that's a great way to do it. Two, keeping up with current candidates. I mean, you can eliminate human error. You don't accidentally forget information that has already been shared or something that hasn't been given to them. Sharing relevant resources throughout the process just to make sure that it connects with the candidate's interests or questions, because you've pulled that information out with very little effort. And then also the piece around feedback that I was saying earlier. I think just AI-powered tools can automate the collection and analysis of the candidate feedback through either the surveys or even just through the interview logs, right? The communication logs that we've had. And this, I think, can allow organizations to gather insights into the candidate experience, but also allow for a really personalized experience for the candidate, where they shared with like the areas of improvement, actions that they can take to do better the next time. One that I was also reading about recently that piqued my interest was around using chatbots to potentially on company websites. I know that we use that chatbots in so many different spaces, but specifically within recruitment to provide information on job openings, on application status updates, just or answering any FAQs that candidates have. I think can be really helpful. Another one I would say is one that we've been starting to use more recently is around AI-powered video interview platforms. This again goes into some of the like note-taking capability. If I'm in an interview and I don't have to take notes and listen verbatim for every single thing that the candidate is saying and just focus on the candidate, one, it provides for a much better experience overall as a candidate, and two, you don't forget anything that the person has said. It is something that multiple people can watch without having to repeat interviews with several different people, while also getting the AI summarized notes at the end of an interview. So I think those are some of the big ones. The last one I'll say, this is I think a bit far-fetched, but not far-fetched, but a bit future-looking. I think we've used the term quality of hire has been thrown around a lot in talent acquisition more recently. I think AI can really analyze historical recruitment data to identify patterns and like predict candidate success. It's something that I worked on, but much more using your usual data analysis, but not really leaning into the AI piece of it. So I think leveraging AI can really help organizations take those data-driven decisions to the next level, especially with predicting future hiring needs.
Well, this is really awesome. While you were speaking, something that came to my mind is, how AI is actually helping HR professionals to be like superhuman. So with the example you gave of, with the tons of, people they come in contact with, resumes they have to go through, AI, serving as a means to remember those conversations really, really does help with personalization. So that's a very great point. Over to you, Max.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of giving an overview of all the different ways. There's a lot. AI can really enhance probably every part of the recruiting process. I do think, a couple examples. Sourcing, I think, just gets a lot better, right? Increasing engagement and responsiveness via sourcing. If you're not already, writing personalized messages and reaching out to the folks that you think are most likely to respond to your outreach, you're not maximizing your response rates in sourcing. And so I think that's a really easy way to sort of start implementing it, is because you don't need any new tools. You can just go to, use ChatGPT and try it out for yourself and see how that works, just to get comfortable with it. And there are a lot of tools to help you with that once you do get comfortable with it. I also think you mentioned like answering basic questions and stuff like scheduling back and forth. I think those are things where like personalization matters, but I think the speed is really important in terms of how fast you can answer a basic question. Oftentimes candidates don't want to dig through the really long JD or go to a bunch of different pages to find information. Yeah, if you can, if they can just send an email asking a question, get an answer within 5 minutes, that's really, really cool. And I think that will be the standard recruiting experience at most companies in a few years, where you should, as a candidate, expect to be able to send a message and get a response within a few minutes to your specific question that's very tailored to the role that you're applying to or interviewing for. I think, I'll sort of shameless plug, like Dover does build a lot of AI tools for HR teams and for talent teams. So we have a lot of free tools. A big focus for us has been like building free products for any company to be able to start using AI in their recruiting process. And we've been doing this for a lot of years. So there's a lot more to it than just the sort of LLM aspects. There's a lot of, we just call it like kind of plumbing behind the scenes that needs to go right as well. So one tool that you can use, we call it Recruiting Copilot, which is basically like a second brain for you when you're recruiting. It pops up relevant candidate information wherever you might be in your Gmail and your LinkedIn, your wherever you're kind of in your ATS, wherever you're talking to that candidate. And then it also helps you write one-click personalized emails to a candidate. So if you go to a LinkedIn profile, click a button, it'll write a nice personalized email based on that person's experiences and stuff like that. So again, if you want to get started boosting your sourcing interest rates and stuff like that, feel free to go to Dover.com and use that.
Awesome. Max, I love the fact that you keep hammering on speed. Like for me, I think the world would be a better place if candidates can get like feedback at the snap of their fingers. It will make for a very, very good, experience actually, and of course lead to engagement throughout the process, right? This conversation can go into spin into different dimensions, but I'm afraid that we're short of time. So I would like to ask one more question before we call it a day, right? So the last question would be: artificial intelligence has the potential to redefine job descriptions and candidate profiling. How do you see AI shaping these areas to better match candidates and the roles they're applying for. Max, go first.
Sure. Yeah, the biggest thing I think that's really exciting on this front is the status quo in recruiting today is every part of the process is a little bit disconnected. So you have this JD that kind of lives there in isolation, and it's just a bunch of text that somebody wrote once, and then you have the interview questions that you're using for your first round and maybe your second round, third round, et cetera. And that's kind of related to the JD, but not always, right? There's sometimes other stuff there. Then there's like when you're sourcing candidates, right? You're kind of maybe creating different filters or kind of eyeballing what's going on and trying to pick the candidates that you think will best match the JD. And they're all kind of disconnected. I mean, as somebody who's used lots of tools, and I'm sure you have too, they all just kind of live in separate places. They're not intertwined in like a smart way. And so one of the things I'm really excited about is those things should all be connected. And when a hiring manager rejects a candidate at the second round, that should actually maybe modify the JD, maybe modify the sourcing criteria that your sourcing team is using. It should all kind of talk to each other so that you can incorporate feedback in real time based on what's actually going on and prevent the issue of, you have 8 or 9 or 10 internal stakeholders for this one role. They all don't even really agree on what's going on. And so you can't hire for this role for 6 months. That's a common problem that I see. And I think AI has the potential to like make all those things actually talk to each other in a really smart way. So I'm really excited to be building that.
Yes, I see that really improving the quality of candidates that apply for the jobs at the end of the day. Actually, yeah. Over to you, Anita.
Yeah, I loved all of the things that Max just covered. I think with AI, like at Zapier specifically, we don't require resumes in our application, but we do expect candidates to answer a series of application questions related specifically to the role. So I think currently these questions are read and evaluated by our recruiters, and it can be rather time consuming. Again, we were talking about speed and the time consuming process, just especially for roles that get a lot of traction. And while it's important to note that our recruiters are, in fact, experts in recruiting for these functions, right? Whether it's for software engineering or product marketing, they're not necessarily experts in the function themselves. And I think AI can really benefit here in helping us refine the questions that we ask people so that we're getting the right candidate profiles to find the best fit candidate much faster. So I think that's one big piece. I also think AI could potentially better match candidates for roles based on responses and how closely they match the work and the role we're hiring for. Like Max was saying earlier, you pull in a LinkedIn profile, you're able to see this and get that match with the personalized communication, but also for the recruiter to know exactly which candidate would match what based on the requirements, either that are stated in the job description itself or based on conversations that they've had in their kickoff meetings with the hiring managers. And I think anything that requires folks to spend a lot of time evaluating something, as an automation company, we're all about the efficiency and trying to be able to make the process faster. And then lastly, I would say the skills assessment piece. I can see a huge opportunity in the skills assessment side of things. It is a time-consuming process. You need multiple folks to do. We take skills take-home tests. We do skills interviews. Just to be able to do that through automated assessments or simulations just sounds like it would be a fantastic time saver and a game changer in the whole efficiency of hiring process.
Thank you very much, Anita. Yeah, so this brings us to the end of this session. I have to thank you all for your time and sharing your experience with us. It's been a very insightful conversation, and I hope all of you who have made it to this session equally learned a lot. All the very best as you go through the remaining engaging sessions we have packed for you at the AI for HR Virtual Summit. Thank you.